All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back for another episode. We are 5 for 5 this week. Hell yeah. All right, if you guys have not listened to the daily podcast episodes this week, go ahead and check them out once you're all done with this. Today, we're going to be talking about how to adjust your workouts when injured. Now, this comes right off of a call I just had with one of my clients. We do our quarterly calls like every 12 weeks. We talk about the previous 12 weeks, then what's coming up for the next 12 weeks, and just hop on a Zoom and talk it out. And she right now is dealing with a thing with her hand and more specifically her wrist. So grip is a bit of an issue. So we talked about ways to modify her program, which I'm going to talk to you guys about today. All right. So let's first talk about when it comes to injuries, it's very, very important to first distinguish, is it an injury or is it a tweak? Big, big, big difference. Okay. To figure out the difference between the tweak or an injury, I would highly recommend checking out episode 198 with Dr. Susie Spurlock. It's around the 25-minute mark, and it will help a lot with figuring out exactly if it's like good or bad pain. Okay. Because when it comes to a tweak, one of the big things that is definitive about that versus an injury is like length of time. So if it hurts, like, yes, we're going to go through pain at some points in our lives, especially as we get older. Pain is going to become more of a thing. It's very, very important to figure out, is this like something that's going to go away, or is this something that needs attention? So definitely check out that episode with Dr. Susie Spurlock. And also, if we're talking about tweaks and injuries and things like that, or more specifically, good versus bad pain, you want to be very, very sure about what we're dealing with, because a lot of people do avoid that burning sensation when they're working out, which is actually a sign that we're doing something good, but they think it's bad because it's like, oh, this is a foreign feeling. I don't like this. When in reality, it's going to get them the results that they want. It's going to help put on more muscle, and it's going to help them live a higher quality of life. But you need to experience that for yourself. So an easy way is like, if you are, say, if you don't have any elbow or wrist or hand injuries or anything, just take a band or a really light dumbbell and just do bicep curls, as many as you possibly can. And that burning sensation you feel in the middle of the bicep, not towards the elbow, not towards the shoulder, but like dead center, that's the burning sensation that's okay. And that's what we want. Or let's say your arms are no good. You could go on like a leg extension machine if your knees and ankles are okay, and just do the leg extension where you straighten your leg out and then bend it. And same concept, do it lightweight, do it for a lot of reps, and experience what that burning sensation feels like, and just reinforce the fact that, hey, I'm okay. This is not bad. But if it's in the joint, if it's radiating, shooting really like bad, and you're like, something's off, then that's bad pain. All right. So if you are truly injured, then you need to be under the guidance of a physical therapist and possibly even a surgeon if it gets really, really bad. Okay. Tweaks will eventually happen to people who, like I said, it's going to be a thing. Like if you're an active person, tweaks happen. It's more about figuring out how to work around them, not something that, oh, I got a tweak. Now I'm never doing this ever again. Okay. Because that's just pointless. You're going to experience pain in one way or another. You got to learn how to navigate it. Okay. Now, that being said, a physical therapist visit does beat the hell out of having to see a cardiologist. Now, you should be seeing both, but to the point of like, it's better to deal with tweaks rather than dealing with like heart disease. So pick your battle. Right. Yep. Got a little ahead of myself. Okay. When it comes to a tweak, the key is to learn how to work around tweaks instead of through them. Okay. We don't want to keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, because then that would be insanity. All right. Working through tweaks can result in progressing into an injury. And that's when the surgeon gets involved, and that's when it's no fun. Okay. Working around it gets you back to 100% faster than if you did absolutely nothing and just babied it. And pause. When I say that, that doesn't apply to tendonitis, like stuff like that. You do need to baby it. But if it's just a little tweak here and there, usually doing pain-free motion will fix it right up. But tendonitis is like that big giant asterisk right now, because even the littlest thing usually pisses that off. So to any of the golfers and tennis players who have trouble holding on to a freaking coffee mug, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So, how to reduce your risk. Number one is ease back in. A lot of people get hurt right off the bat, jumping right back into what they were doing full force, if not harder, because they're trying to make up for lost time. Okay. Let's cut that shit out. That's not helping anybody. And it's going to be a very bad way to jump back in and put yourself in a bad situation. So let's not do that. Next is don't max out on day one. So if you were using, say, 30 pounds right before you got your tweak or your injury, don't do 30 pounds on day one. Try out 15, make sure you're good. Good. Up it's 20. Good. Up it's 25. Like test yourself and reassure your body that, hey, everything's okay. Because graded exposure matters. That's something they talk about in PT, graded exposure. Basically, you start small and then let your body get acclimated as you go. That's the educated way to do it. That's the smart way to do it. So let's do it that way. Number three is try to figure out what caused the previous pains and adjust accordingly. So if you did something that pissed off, like classic cases, if your lower back or your shoulders hurt every single time you do a barbell back squat, then stop barbell back squatting. Okay. If your back hurts every time that you do a traditional barbell deadlift, then don't barbell deadlift. All right. You don't have to do these exercises just because some bro on the internet said this is the only way to do it. Okay. No, do whatever variation works for you because at the end of the day, movement patterns, all of them need to be accounted for. You need to push, you need to pull, you need to squat, you need to hinge, and you need to carry, and you need to rotate. So, whatever that comes in is what's right for you. So, if you're not able to pick up a barbell, then do it with single leg or do it with dumbbells, do it with kettlebells, do it with bands. There's a million ways to do it. Okay. The main priority here is pain free movement. Okay. So that way, if you are experiencing discomfort, it's that muscle burn that we talked about, not, oh my God, I'm like hurting in the joints and things like that. So, when it comes to pain-free movement, just know not moving at all for weeks or months is usually the worst thing you can do when you experience a tweak. There is a saying in the physical therapy space, motion is lotion. Okay. When you go to usually younger physical therapists and even surgeons too, they will try and get you back to activity very, very quickly. Anybody who tells you do absolutely nothing is stuck in the Stone Ages and they really need to get up to speed. Okay, find a variation of the same exercise to do pain free if possible. Like I was just saying, if you can find a variation that you prefer that does all the same things, same exact movement, but it's more comfortable, it's usually the way to go and it can speed up healing. Obviously, I repeat myself here. Okay, so there are different ways to do this, different variations that are very simple. Doesn't mean you have to ditch the exercise completely. Like if you like doing barbell stuff, that's totally fine. And if you want to keep doing it because it's not really the positioning, it's the load that bothers you, then there's ways to get around that. So like if you can put a barbell on your back for squats and your shoulders are totally fine, and it's really more your back that's getting into it, that's hurting. And if you do it with lighter weight, there's no issues. These are probably right up your alley. And that goes for pretty much anything as far as it being a load issue versus like a positional issue, if that makes sense. So one of the easiest things to do is reduce the range of motion. Sometimes we just can't go all the way down, and that's totally fine. Go as low as you can while being in that pain-free area. Okay. And then if at any point you do feel that, stop just short of that. And then you'll be surprised. Sometimes you get stronger and all of a sudden you can actually increase range of motion over time. So it, it it's not worth pushing into the bad pain to try and like touch your chest with a barbell or to go ass to grass on a squat. Okay. You could eventually get there, but it's like you got to start slow. Which brings me to my next one, which is slower tempo. Okay. If it's a load issue, like you just add 5 more pounds and all of a sudden, ooh, that hurts in the wrong way, take that 5 pounds off. But if you want to make it harder, go slower. So on a squat, go slower on the way down for 3 to 5 seconds, or a barbell bench press or dumbbell bench press, whatever, 3 to 5 seconds on the way down. That can help a lot too. Next is utilizing pauses. Sometimes tension is the issue, especially with my example with the low back when it comes to squats. A lot of times people just lose the ability to stay tight, and that's the real issue. It's not the fact that their form is bad, it's just the fact that they're not squeezing as hard. And when you don't have that tension, when you don't squeeze really hard, like you see some of these power lifters that are like about to bust a vessel in their eyes or their nose. Okay, the reason that that sometimes happens is because they're creating a lot of tension, because when you squeeze your muscles, that supports the bones and the joints that they are around. So you're able to do things like lifting in a safer, stronger manner. So utilize pauses. Like if you're doing a squat, try and pause at the bottom and hold everything really tight for like 1, 2, maybe 3 seconds, and then stand it back up. Or same with a bench press. If you're really losing everything at the bottom and you're starting to squirm, like that's a really, if you tend to do a little squirming when you're lifting, this is probably the reason why you might be experiencing pain. So just bear down and squeeze everything as hard as you can. Next is higher repetitions with lower weight. Sometimes going up in weight is not the answer. And if you can't, just add some repetitions because that way you could still get mechanical tension, which is those like last couple of reps that move slower, even though we're pushing just as hard, if not harder. So building muscles, your goal, that would be a good way to go. Next is changing the angle. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of people who, for example, like bench press, when they're laying flat on the bench and they're pushing up and down, if they were to take that bench and just crank it up one notch, like one little thing, um, as far as the incline goes, all of a sudden shoulders feel a whole lot better. So little changes like that when it comes to incline are really, really helpful. Or for example, when we're squatting, if you can get ankle raisers, like when it comes to heel wedges or anything like putting your heels on a couple of plates with your toes touching the ground, all of a sudden you're able to improve your form because of a mobility restriction that is now no longer an issue. Next is a different modality. So, like I said, you could do barbells, you could do bands, you could do dumbbells, machines, chains. There's so many different ways to do it, and all of them have tons of different benefits. So it's always worth trying and just seeing how it feels. And last but not least is one of my personal favorites is freeing the scap. This is for people that have bench pressed forever and never do push-ups or landmine presses. Sometimes you'll be surprised when you get away from the bench press for a little bit and you start doing push-ups where your shoulders are allowed to protract and retract. Okay, when you do landmine presses where you're able to punch up and rotate your scapula upward. Okay, when your scap can move freely instead of your shoulders being pinched down and back all the time, sometimes that helps and it can reduce pain. So when it comes to loading, this is the main thing that I talked about with my client on that call, which is like she can't really grip or hold anything. So I'm like, okay, let's have some fun with this. I'm going to bring back some of the stuff that like I haven't touched in a while. Big one being let's load with a backpack because with a backpack, you could throw it on your back, you could throw it in the front. And if you can't squeeze anything with your hands, it's fine. You could just loop your arms in and just use that. So you could still squat, you could still RDL, you could still deadlift, you could still bridge, all with this backpack on you instead of holding it in your hands. Next, you could use body weight. And if you want to use body weight and you want to make it harder, go slower, like we just talked about. Next is a Xerxer hold. So if you have access to a bar and preferably one of those pads that are on the bar, because this is kind of painful if you don't have some sort of padding. Basically, you keep your arms at 90 degrees and right in the crease of your elbow is where the bar sits. So if it's your hands that are the issue, they are no longer a factor. Next is using the good side. So if you have one hand that's no good, but the other one's fine, hold it either at your shoulder, like a rack position, or down low, like a farmer carry position, and that'll be totally fine. And then when it comes to the last thing, it's the machines. So this is for the people that go to gyms or have the luxury of having machines at home. But this is one of the big reasons why I highly recommend people get to the gym because it allows for more flexibility like this, where you can get a machine that all of a sudden just takes a lot of things out of the equation. So if you have access, big, big help. Next is if you have like a shoulder issue, like I talked about, like with barbell back squat, if your hands going backward crank on the shoulder and you just can't get it there, then there are plenty of other ways. Number one is a farmer hold. So just grab a couple of dumbbells or kettlebells and hold them down at your side. That's fine. Rack hold is another good one. So if you want to hold them up at your shoulders, that's fine. Xerxer carry or Xerxer hold again, where it's in your elbows. Trap bar is a very underrated way to squat. So if you can get a couple of wedges, like I mentioned, where you can raise your heel up, all of a sudden even though you're doing a trap bar and most people think it's a deadlift, if your knees travel forward and your torso stays upright, that makes it more quad dominant. So you're getting more of a squat feel rather than a deadlift feel. So you don't have to worry about your shoulders being an issue and you can load up really, really heavy that way. And then last but not least, machines. Okay, machines are a big, big help. So just know if you keep going back to that same old thing's going to happen. Like I said before. So just again, another reminder, I'll say it again. I feel like my mom, I'm like, I just need to say it again. Okay. Don't keep going back to the stuff that keeps hurting you. There are other options, and I'm more than happy to help you. Like if you sign up for one of the free strategy calls for being in the Fit 40 family, I'm more than happy to help. I've done that for multiple people. And then let's say you don't want to address that. So, like, if you do go back to the same thing and you want to address your mobility and you're really dead set on this, then that's okay. Now, if you want to go back to it, but you don't want to address the mobility issue, then there are ways around that too. So, like I said, if you don't want to work on ankle mobility and squats keep hurting your knees or they keep hurting your back because your knees aren't moving forward enough, whatever it is, if that's the case, adding something like ankle wedges or sorry, heel wedges makes a boatload of difference. Okay. Something like that can be a very, very big help. Or just using other modalities that are in the gym. Again, it would be case dependent. So I'd be more than happy to help if you guys need the help. So, like, for example, let's say you have that bum shoulder and you keep doing barbell back squats. Like I mentioned, I keep getting ahead of myself here. Okay. Try doing goblet, landmine, or safety bar squats too. So, this brings up a good point as well, which is you can make more out of the barbell than just holding it on your back. And you can utilize other versions of the barbell. So landmine is a good one. You can wedge it into a landmine attachment. They sell them on Amazon for like 20, 30 bucks, and they're just perfectly fine. And then there's also safety bar squats, which are like they kind of have padding around the neck area and let you hold the two handles in front of you. So that's always a good option. And then goblet. So if you want to use a dumbbell, just hold it vertically with both hands and you're good to go. Or a kettlebell too. Kettlebells are great for goblet squats. And then less mobility demands on the shoulder equal potentially less pain and better results. So if you're like, but I don't know if I get away from this barbell squat, if I'm going to get the same results. You're right. You probably won't. You'll probably get better ones because you're not going to keep having to start over at square one every time you get hurt. All right, so some simple tips to reduce pain based on the area. So if you're experiencing pain, maybe one of these things will help. Okay, so if you have neck issues, support your head. If you're on the floor and the bench and your head is cranked up because you're just too tight to like let it hit the floor, give yourself a pillow. No harm, no shame. Um, Avoid and or reduce upper back pulling. So when it comes to like anything that involves the traps, really like face pulls, shrugs, band pull aparts, reverse flies, a lot of this stuff gets at your neck, and you don't need to do this stuff if it is doing more harm than good. We want to work those muscles, but we also don't want to cause unnecessary pain. And especially the neck, it just gets at you all day and it really affects you. So not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze in that particular scenario. Um, it can help to improve T-spine rotation. So if you go on YouTube and look up T-spine rotation exercises, I know I have a couple on there. They can be a really, really big help, assuming you can do them pain-free. And then address the shoulder, elbow, or wrist if you want to go that route and improve your mobility. Next is shoulder issues. So check rowing and pressing first because a lot of people do exacerbate shoulder pain by doing pressing and rowing incorrectly. So, for example, when you're doing a bench press and you come down, your elbow comes down, your wrist comes down. All of a sudden, the lower you go, your shoulder starts to round forward, or we call that like the anterior dumping. We don't want that because that can potentially make shoulder issues worse. So make sure like when you're pressing, when you're rowing, your shoulders are squeezing back when so for example, you're pressing as you're coming down, your shoulder is squeezing back as you're coming down, and you're going to notice your chest will puff up more, and then you punch up. And then with a row, you want to feel all those muscles in the back of your shoulder squeezing, not in your bicep and the front of your shoulder. That's a good tell that we're not doing it correctly. Next is consider using the floor for things like pressing. So that way your elbow can't go past your body, which will make it harder for that anterior dump to happen. You'd be surprised how many people go from regular bench to floor presses and they're like, wow, this feels so much better. And it's like, yeah, it does. And then, like I said before, free the scap, do landmine stuff, do push-ups. and let your shoulder move freely. Don't always keep it pinched down and back, and address T-spine rotation, elbow or wrist if you want to do the mobility. Elbow, got an golfer's elbow, tennis elbow, or anything like that. Address the overuse first if that's the issue. If it's tennis, if it's golf, don't go and play 36 holes of golf on day one of the season. Please, for the love of God. I get it. It's fun. I get it. We're eager to get out there, but your body is not ready for it. You got to ease in. So when it comes to golf, do 9 holes the first day. Do 9 holes the second day. And then if you feel good after breaking it up like that, go to 18 the next week. And then if you feel good doing that, do 18 the next week. And then eventually you could get to the point where it's like, okay, 36 is a bit of a stretch, but hey, it won't kill you and it won't give you golfer's elbow. Same with tennis. I get it. The ladies want to go play. Like Janice is begging you to come out and you want to play for 3-4 hours. I get it. But that 3-4 hours on day one is going to wreck your elbow, and it's going to make it harder to do it again and again and again. And your season is going to get cut short because you're going to have to milk that tennis elbow for the next 6 months. So let's not do that. Okay. Also make sure to warm up. So if you're able to, do band curls, tricep press downs, things like that. So if you do feel your elbow on things like where you're doing chin ups or pull downs or on bench pressing and things like that, this stuff does tend to help, doing like band curls and tricep press downs with the band as well, for with a light band for high reps. That way you get some blood flow in there, you get the tissues warmed up, and it usually feels a hell of a lot better. Next is eliminate or assist grip if needed. So if you have something like Versa grips, for example, they're a really big help if you're feeling issues in your elbow, because all you have to do is hold the leather strap instead of squeezing like hell to hold on to certain things. Straps like of any kind can really help with that too. And if you want to go the mobility route, address your shoulder and wrist. Okay. When it comes to this mobility stuff, the best case scenario would be to go to a physical therapist and ask them for specific help, because I could give you every mobility exercise in the world, like you see on social media, and it won't make a damn bit of difference if it's not the right one. So find somebody that can give you the right guidance. Next is wrist issues. So again, address overuse if that's the issue when it comes to tennis, golf, basketball, bowling, any of that stuff. Just address the overuse and make sure we're going at it smart to start the season. Adjust grip. So when it comes to the barbell, for example, this is big on barbell bench press. Sometimes people have wrist issues holding on. So switch to dumbbells. Or even if you have a football bar or a Swiss bar, they call it, where it's like this modified bar where it allows you to have a more neutral grip, that's great too. Or if you want to use dumbbells and hold it at a neutral grip, then that's fine too. And then eliminate exercises that irritate it. So if you really, every time you do push-ups, because your wrist is in that flex position, it bugs it, don't do push-ups, or do them while holding on to dumbbells so you can maintain a neutral wrist. Just don't keep doing that thing that pisses it off. And then if you want to go the mobility route, there's you could address the shoulder or elbow if needed. Now, when it comes to lower back and hip, this is a little bit of a bitch. I'm not going to lie. Lower back and hip can be tricky, but they usually play off each other in what seems to help. So number one is like if you are in pain, reducing hinging or bridging can help, because if you are doing deadlifts and that whatever version you are doing is pissing it off, again, we're just doing the same thing over and over again. What do you think is going to happen? And same with bridging. Sometimes it's just too much at the time, and you might need to address things like your hip mobility or things like that. So good to reduce it in the short term, and just make sure that your program doesn't go overboard on it, because there's a lot of dumb programs out there that will have deadlifting, kettlebell swinging, and bridging, and do them at such a high volume all in the same day. It's just asking for your hips and your lower back to hurt. So it could just be dumb programming as well. Try implementing static core exercises. So holds, things like planks, hollow holds, side planks, all that good stuff. Use the floor or bench for support. So if you need to, when it comes to like say bench press, some people do feel it in their backs because they might be shorter, so their legs are a little bit stretched out trying to reach the floor. So if you need to, throw some plates under your feet to help with that. You'd be surprised, sometimes it does help lower back pain, but it could also help just going to the floor if that's the issue too. And then when it comes to half kneel or standing instead of sitting, that can be a really good thing just to keep in there as a preventative care thing. So when I say half kneel, that basically means like one knee is on the ground, one leg is up. So you're in like that like coach tells you to huddle up and everybody take a knee, that position. Okay. When you do that, that's going to open up and release the front of your thigh, the rectus femoris, which, if it's tight, can actually cause lower back pain. This is something that gets very tight when we sit a lot. So it can help having half kneel stance exercises in your program with that. And then when it comes to mobility, you could address the hips and or T-spine mobility if needed. Now, knees, another fun one. Reducing range of motion is a really good one. I know there's a lot of emphasis on knees over toes and all that stuff, but some people just don't do well with it, and that's okay. So if that comes down to not pushing your knees as far forward and not going as low, then that's totally fine. As long as you're hitting the right muscles and you're not putting yourself in pain, we're good. And then at least while the knees are hurting, more hinging rather than squatting is usually the way to go. Because when we do deadlifts and bridges and things like that, we don't have as much of the shearing forces from our knees pushing forward because you don't bend your knees quite as much. So it can help doing more hinging until your knees are feeling better. And then when it comes to mobility, hips and or ankles are usually the way to go. And then ankles reduce the range of motion because, again, at the ankle, it's all relative to what the shin is doing usually. So if the knee is moving forward, the shin is moving forward, that'll place extra stress on the ankle. So it can help to reduce range of motion by not going as low or doing hinging things. Using wedges for squats and lunges can help too, because that just opens up the ankle and allows for more artificial range of motion. And then more hinging rather than squatting, again, like I just said, and addressing the knees and or the feet if needed. Sometimes it can be like a foot issue, like maybe it's like mechanically you're just not doing things right as far as like drilling your big toe and your pinky toe into the floor and keeping a tripod foot. Something like that can make a world of difference for the ankle. And some other random helpful tips is use bands or chains with dumbbells or barbells if it helps you feel better. Because sometimes at the most vulnerable position, when it comes to something like a squat or a bench, when you're at the bottom, usually that's the part people have issues with. So, what a chain or a band allows for is at the bottom, you don't have as much weight on the bar because the chain, more of it is touching the ground or the band isn't as stretched out. And as you stand up, you take on more links of the chain or you take on a more stretch of the band, and it makes it heavier as you stand up. So it makes it easier at the potentially painful part and harder at the part where you feel better. So that's one way to go. Using machines when limbs are compromised, like I said, gym memberships do pay off. Still training the good side. So there's something called cross education, and it's a neurophysiological phenomenon where an increase in strength is witnessed within an untrained limb following the unilateral strength training in the opposite contralateral limb. Cross education can also be seen in the transfer of skills from one limb to the other. So what the heck does that mean? Basically, if you were to like break your right arm, but you kept doing all of the exercises on your left arm, it's weird, but just by training that left arm, your body's need for some sort of symmetry will allow that injured arm to stay relatively strong and muscular compared to not doing anything at all. So is there going to be a difference in strength and size? Yes, but it won't be as pronounced if you train the other limb. It's weird. I don't know why. I have yet to come across anything that truly explains it, but it's a thing. Okay, recovery. Staying active helps a lot, but if you don't do the right things the other 23 hours of the day, recovery will take longer. Suboptimal recovery can also increase the frequency of nagging injuries and tweaks because you could be doing everything right, but you're just pushing it too hard based on the fact that you still eat like shit, drink wine every single night, are stressed out beyond belief. All that stuff will result in you feeling like shit. So you got to take care of it. All right. So focus on sleep. Number one, if you can't get any more hours, then try and get better quality by reducing noise, keeping a good environment so it's cold and dark in your room, and doing your best to minimize stressful stuff before bed, like going on social media, looking at political ads, stuff like that, the news. Okay. That will help sleep tremendously if you only do that stuff in the morning. Protein, getting at least zero point 0.7 grams per pound of lean body mass, or at bare minimum, just a palm size at every single meal. Three is hydration, making sure we're drinking enough. I like going by pea color because if you try and aim for that really, really light yellow, that's going to require more fluid over time and your body will adapt and adjust, and you won't be running to the bathroom all the time that first couple of days. And last but not least, like I said, stress management. Control the stress that you can control. Don't subject yourself to unnecessary stressors if you don't have to. And like I said, I do strategy calls on this stuff. So feel free to take advantage of that. But for the strategy call, you got to be in the Fit 40 family. So if you're not already, get your butt in there. It's a great time. We're running a challenge right now, and there's going to be another challenge come November. So, like I said, get your butt in there. And if you want the full deal and you want programs that actually allow you to do all the stuff that I just talked about, that's what Fit 40 online coaching is for. So if you're interested in that, go check out the link down below and you'll get all the info on the Kickstart and how to get started on that. So thank you guys for tuning in. I know this was a little longer than the past couple of days, but I hope you got a lot out of it. Yeah, so everybody have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday with an awesome guest. But until then, go kick some ass. I will see you later.